Welcome to another episode of our personal empowerment audio program, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder, and our program today is entitled Imagination Without Limits. I mean, sure, anyone can imagine, but can you imagine things that are just really, really difficult to imagine, and things that are beyond the norm, beyond the average, beyond the daily experience? Can you imagine things that are so out there that you actually stretch your imagination?
It's generally understood to be a higher brain function, really a quality of critical thinking, to be able to consider something you don't believe.
Right, as if it were possible, even though it's fiction. It's like it's writing fiction, but it's to actually go as if it were true and play it out as if it were really true. It's not true. You may know for a fact in your heart that it's not true, but play it out as if it were true and living in this nation called imagination.
I think one of the great benefits for me, the way I look at my ability to manage emotions and guide a conversation, really relationship management, I call it, after Daniel Goleman's model, is the ability to be able to have discussions with people, whether it's politics or religion or philosophy or psychology, what is current events, whatever it happens to be, and take positions that I don't necessarily believe in, to play a devil's advocate. And you can do that if you can manage your emotions and see the ebb and flow of emotional feelings inside you. And I think to be interested in why other people do that then, to say, well, boy, you sure feel strongly about this or that, and the whys of it. I've always thought that was really interesting as a talk show host, but just meeting people in public. Not only what do you think, but why do you believe what you believe? I always thought that was much more interesting.
Yeah, because people believe a lot of similar things. I mean, a lot of people have beliefs that they share with most other people. In fact, almost everything that we believe we share with other people, like that's a tree and that's a door, that's a wall. You know, these are all beliefs that we all share. We call it by this name and we use it for this function. And everybody thinks of a door as something you open and walk through and not something that you float on down the river. You know, it's like it's a door. It's not a raft. You know, it could be a raft. So, yeah, most of life is agreements. Most of life is like we have this beliefs that we agree in. But what we're talking about here is those people who go outside of that accepted reality and can imagine new things, different things, things that have never been imagined before. We were talking earlier about Einstein, you know, who could imagine riding on a rocket ship going at the speed of light and picturing what would happen back on Earth in terms of the difference in time between. So it's an amazing ability to go out and really imagine. One of my imagination heroes is Walt Disney. I mean, you know the great story when they first opened Epcot Center and the president of Disney was standing there and saying, you know, wow, what a shame that Walt wasn't here to see this. And Mrs. Disney got up, his widow, and said, if Walt hadn't seen this, none of us would be here.
That's a great story. It really is a good story. It's distressing to hear people talk about, well, that's only in your imagination, or that's just my imagination, or the way adults sometimes speak to children, saying, get your head out of the clouds, get your feet on the earth, get grounded, get real, as if pessimism and negativity is somehow more real than dreaming and optimism and imagination. But we have to not only put our belief systems aside when we imagine, when we exercise this higher brain function, this mental facility that we can develop, your ability to imagine things you don't believe, things you haven't encountered yet. But in addition to setting the belief systems aside, we got to put aside the negativity, the pessimism, oh, that'll never work. Oh, well, that's impossible. Oh, well, we tried that before. Or boy, that's a dumb idea. You got to be willing to really go out there and play with these ideas. As you mentioned Einstein, the idea of putting a saddle on a light beam and riding it out into space at its speed of light. Well, of course, time would not change. Every time he looks down, he's seeing that same little packet of light that bounced off the clock. It's a brilliant insight for anyone, but especially a patent clerk with a good imagination.
Well, it's all relative, as I'm sure he would say. The bottom line here is, though, most people are, I guess, afraid or unwilling to really stretch their imaginations in the direction of positivity, although they're more than willing to go all the way in terms of negativity. For example, imagining worst-case scenarios is easy for people to do. Like, what bad things could happen? People worry constantly, spending their time thinking about what bad things could happen. This is imagination. I mean, it hasn't happened. It's not real. It's imagination. It's easy for most people to imagine really, really bad things happening, and they justify it by thinking, well, I'm bracing myself for it, I'm preparing myself for it, I'm getting myself ready just in case it happens. But most people won't let themselves go off in the other direction, even though it's unrealistic that the worst case scenario will happen. People still go there. Well, it's also unrealistic that the best case scenario will happen, but people are unwilling to go there. People are unwilling to imagine what's the greatest possible outcome that you could have. What's the greatest possible life you could be living? What's the most magnificent thing that could happen from doing this or that or the other thing? People are unwilling to go because it's so unlikely to happen, and they're afraid to get their hopes up, because if I get my hopes up, if I imagine something that isn't going to happen, then I'm going to be disappointed, and there's this fear of disappointment, which is, again, a fear of an imagination thing. So once we understand that there is no danger from imagination, you can imagine any possibility, any impossibility. In fact, some of my greatest imagination heroes are people who imagine impossibilities, like science fiction writers, for example. You can imagine impossibilities. It stretches you. It helps you. It's a higher brain function to imagine things that aren't or can't be even. Then there's no harm in imagining things that are not possible. There's great pleasure in doing so sometimes, and always there's great exercise for the mind in stepping out of the is and creating a what could be.
I think it's also important to talk about imagination as more a quality of intuition than logic or reasoning. There is such a thing as inductive logic. It's a if-then statement that really doesn't work unless you're pulling on a really broad set of data. If this supposition is true, then this may be true and that may be true. I can extrapolate.
If 93% of this sample of 4 million said this, then you can extrapolate that probably the rest will.
That's inductive logic. Most logic, the vast majority of logic, including math itself, algebra, is deductive in nature. It's factoring out. It's eliminating what doesn't work and breaking things down into smaller and smaller pieces.
Lowest common denominators.
That's a great way of saying it. And I'm not saying that doesn't have a role in a larger imaginative process. It certainly does. There's time to do that Sherlock Holmes stuff, right? Be deductive. It's like ordering off a menu. You think you're ordering what you want, but the process is eliminating what you've decided you do not want to arrive at 2 or 3 items, and then you grab one.
That's a very important concept, because most people do not go into a restaurant with an idea of what they want. They go in, they look at the menu, and they do this elimination thing. Don't want breakfast, don't want dessert, don't want a sandwich, entree, but don't. And it's not a matter of figuring out what they want. It's a matter of determining what they don't want and seeing what's left. And the philosophy of life of seeing what's left is not nearly as exciting, invigorating, and fulfilling as going and creating what you want instead.
Then, of course, imagination without limits, our theme for the day today, might cause you to put the menu aside or not even look at the darn thing, but just sort of roll your eyes up or off to the side and think to yourself, what would I really like? This is that receptive state I'm talking about, where you open yourself to what would I feel like? Go ahead, body, talk to me. What are we in the mood for? We want hot soup? We want a nice crisp salad? Do we want some vegetables? Are we looking for maybe a sandwich and some really good bread? What do you feel like? And you might say, well, then what if it's not on the menu? Well, talk to the waiter. If it's a nice restaurant, they can probably bring it to you.
Or what was that Jack Nicholson movie where he wanted a sandwich?
5 Easy Pieces.
Yeah, 5 Easy. You figure out a way. Be creative to find a way to get what you want.
Imagination without limits then has a receptive, allowing your feelings to have their way with you component. Again, their logic plays a role in all of this. Feeling your emotional feelings as well as physical sensations in your body. Now we happen to be talking about food in a restaurant here and ordering from a menu, but Steve's point is well taken. How many other areas, non-food areas in your life, are you still ordering off a menu? Because there's only 4 ways to do this. There's only 5 kinds of cars you could possibly own. There's only 2 ways for you to solve this problem, this way or that way. This is a real limitation. If you're to the 3 or the 4 or the 5 choices, you're probably doing pretty well, even though we tend to fall into these ruts where it's the same choices over and over again. But certainly a red flag should be this or that when you believe there's only 2 choices, and they're the same 2 choices that you've been making over and over in your life. What a great opportunity for a little imagination.
Yeah, because from imagination comes that awareness that, if you got those 2, then you could probably have this one and that one and this other one and all kinds of other ones. And you might even have choices you never thought of having before. For example, when the next opportunity comes along and you're sitting with your loved one and they say something like, well, what are you in the mood for? Or what do you feel like doing? Well, what percentage of the time do you say something you've said before? 99.999? This could be an opportunity to say something you've never said before, to do something you've never done before. That's where imagination can really spark up your life, to take a moment and go, well, wait a minute, what am I in the mood for? And go stretch, go look like if I could do anything that was possible. Maybe I can't do all of that, but maybe from that comes one little spark of what I can do right now that would be the coolest thing. So stretch your imagination, do something a little different. It's a good idea. Why is it a good idea? Well, because the more you go out there, the more you stretch your imagination, and I recommend toward the positive rather than toward the negative, but either way works. The more you stretch your imagination, the more you open up your mind to what's possible, the more the muscles that create things get used, and the muscles that create things are the muscles you need to create the things you want to create in your life. Even by imagining creating things that you don't really create, it's all imagination. The subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. A dream that seems like you're falling and feels like you're falling, and it's exactly the same as if you are falling in terms of the stomach dropping and the adrenaline and all that shoots through your body. It's really true for part of your mind. So by going out there and stretching and imagining things that you've never imagined before, you are exercising your mind so that it can now create things it's never created before.
So it's a two-way street. There is the receptive side of imagining without limits, of dreaming, of opening yourself to new possibilities and new choices, breaking out of that rigid group of choices that you've been locked in. And then, as Steve's just explained, as you move in a direction, even if you like 3 of the 5, or you got it down to a couple, and you begin to move in that direction. You don't have to have the specific goal right away if you can determine a general direction to begin to move in. Remember, avoiding what you do not want is not a goal. You've got to begin to have a direction and move toward what it is you do want. And as you get closer, you can peek it and tweak it. You can modify it. You get a little more information because you're getting closer, and now you're even more certain, and you finalize the goal, and then you step right into it. All of that is part of a process of imagination. Just consider the 2 sides, the receptive side, sort of the creative side, and then the manifestation side.
Yeah, the making it up and then the making it happen,
And acting like it's a done deal. That's a very important belief system to have. It's okay if you say to yourself, I don't know how it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. And every day, every hour, I move in that direction.
And, I know it's going to happen, but I also know that if it doesn't happen, what does happen is going to be even better because it's what the universe needs me to have right now. Maybe it'll actually be better. Maybe it'll just seem better. Or maybe it won't seem better, but it'll be better because it has within it the lesson I need to learn to be able to appreciate what it is I do want. It's high intention, low attachment. Yeah, you got to just act as if it's going to happen. You know it's going to happen. Or if it doesn't happen, then the right thing will happen. Because sometimes you don't see the big picture big enough, and sometimes a better thing can happen, better for you kind of thing can happen. So it's really important that that's the way you do it. You create your life not by reacting to all the stimulus that comes up without thinking. You create life by imagining what you want and then going and making that happen as best as you can. If you don't imagine what you want, you get what you get. You get what's given you. You get what's left over. You get what's on the menu. But if you do imagine what you want, you could create something that nobody else ever had before. And you know what? Who you are would be best pleased by something that nobody else ever had before because you're like nobody that's ever lived before. You're unique. Your gifts, your talents, your abilities are different than anybody else's. And it's therefore, it seems to me, your goals, your dreams should be very unique to you. Bottom line, though, is the more you're willing to imagine, the more luscious the bullseye is, the more spectacular the outcome you're aiming at is. Even if you don't get there, you create the most wonderful ride.
The idea that there's some danger, again, in imagining and in dreaming, as if this disappointment you talked about, Steve, is going to be so overwhelming and so disastrous. It's crazy. Once you understand the basic laws of mind, and you reap what you sow, cause and effect, the law of attraction, whatever you want to call it, you cannot afford to dwell on the negative as if that's a good way to prepare for some problem that isn't here yet.
Nor can you totally ignore the negative. But what you must do, and you told me this, what you must do is worry once. You worry once, you figure out what you could do in worst case, and then you get off of the negative and bring your energy where it needs to be.
That frees you then to keep your attention on the prize.
Yep.
To know what it is you want, and again, to live in the moment of moving toward it. This idea that it's the journey, not the destination, that's important in goal setting and problem solving. You might think, well, all you talk about is the goal and attaining it. But yeah, it's in the moment, it's in the unfolding moment that you will learn, that you understand, as Steve is saying, that even what might look like a disaster, if you would not label it, if you would sit in the moment and watch it unfold in your life without judging it as a good thing or a bad thing, often you'll find out that life has a little prize, a little reward for you. This thing that appeared to be bad because it wasn't part of your plan turns out to be great good fortune, especially if you allow it to unfold in your life naturally and normally. We get in trouble with the labeling and the pigeonholing and the judging that this is good and this is bad and this is right and this is wrong, and we're going to micromanage our lives and second-guess the universe.
And we can live our lives deductively in that way and figure out exactly how we want to do it. And people do. They live analytically. They live as best as they can logically. But there's not a lot of fun in that. It's not a lot of fun when things don't change. When you do the same thing over and over again, you get into a rut. It's not a groove. A groove is new things. It's exciting things. It's a different way of being. So imagination is a great part of what it takes to be happy. You have to be able to change, grow, become different than you are, and to do that, it starts with imagining being different than you are. You can't be different than you are before you imagine being different than you are, and that's where it all begins. In that seed, the seed is imagination. Imagination is like the acorn, and the oak grows from it. But you got to have the acorn, and inside of that acorn is everything it needs to know to become this big giant oak tree. You don't have to know how it's going to happen. The acorn doesn't have cognition about how it's going to happen. It just happens, and it'll just happen. Or, as I said, what it'll happen is that's what you'll be aiming at, and then the universe may have some tricks to play and some games to play, and you might not get exactly what you're aiming at. Maybe you'll get something better. Maybe you'll get something that doesn't seem quite as good but is actually better. Who knows? But the bottom line is you got to have something to aim at, and why would you aim at anything less than the greatest thing you could imagine. Why would you do that?
Shoot for the edge of the target.
Yeah, right. It's like if you know there's no harm in it, you're probably not going to get it, but it's the journey, not the destination. Then why would you aim at the edge of the target instead of the right smack dab in the middle of the darn thing? And it's so much more fun when the picture in your mind is the greatest picture. When the idea in your head is the greatest feeling you could have. I mean, why wouldn't you want to treat your mind to that? This is the most wonderful thing I can imagine feeling over and over and over again. It feels the best you could possibly feel.
It's like an Olympic athlete going for the bronze.
Yeah, going to go for that bronze. Well, it's like, hey, at the end when it's all over, if you get the bronze, what a wonderful, wonderful prize that is. But, nobody aims for the bronze. It's like you always aim for the gold.
That's exactly right. A couple of quotes come to mind. One is Timothy Leary. He said famously, "Think for yourself and question authority." Both controversial statements in the 60s. Maybe to some extent they're controversial now in the 21st century, but they certainly should not be. Think for yourself. There is a challenge. And in order to do that, you really have to question authority. You have to be provocative with yourself. We were talking, Steve, about John Lennon's song, Imagine, and how that song can, for a lot of people, stir up a whole mixture of emotions, some of them even contradictory emotions. But that's his role, I think, as an artist, as a melody maker and a lyricist here in particular, as the poet, saying, take a look at this and imagine. Can you imagine? And I mean, just the fact that, yes, we're able to imagine this, and maybe it is uncomfortable, but allow yourself to imagine it anyway. I mean, what's uncomfortable about imagining a world without war or a world where everybody has enough to eat? You might say, well, that's easy to imagine.
Is it?
Not for a lot of people.
Not for a lot of people.
Because it reminds them in the moment that there is war right now and horrible carnage and children dying by the tens of the thousands every day, and how unnecessary that is. It's sort of like the discomfort people often feel when they encounter a homeless person on the street. And part of you wants to help, part of you wants to approach, and then there's this other part that's maybe afraid. And you have to ask yourself, what are you afraid of? What are you imagining here? What is this homeless person reminding you of? And of course, the potential is rich. It could be your better nature that comes out, or it could be your shadow that comes out. Which of the wolves do you feed, as the old story goes? Not that predicts a given behavior in every circumstance, but I think to be sensitive to your feelings, to your emotional nature, and be aware of how you're feeling in the moment is necessary to step into imagination, to live in imagination, and to consider possibilities all the way around it. Get out of yourself, get out of that rut and into the groove. Look at it from all different sides, over, under, sideways, and down. Even
if it's something you believe deeply in your heart, you don't have to abandon that belief to imagine the opposite being true. You don't have to let go. You could still believe, and what you're imagining is fiction. You know in your mind that what you believe is true. For example, John Lennon's Imagine. Imagine there's no heaven and no hell below us. I mean, for millions, hundreds of millions of people, there's hell, there's heaven. Those are real things. Even for you that believe that, and some do, some don't, imagine there isn't. Do that. I mean, do that. That's an incredible exercise to imagine, even just to imagine, like, well, then what else what is there? And if it's not that, is it reincarnate? What is it nothing ever happened? Nothing. Just go there. Get out of, not saying that you have to let go of your belief, but that's a great place to start, because it gets even tougher as the song goes along. Because if you can start with the imagine there's no heaven and then no hell, then it gets into this concept of imagine that there's no need for war, no need for hatred, no need for greed or hunger, nothing to fear or die for. Imagine now. it would have to have started like hundreds of thousands of years ago. We would have to have evolved as a different species than we are, with no fear and no laziness, and this. We all get along, and we all love each other. I mean, human beings, as we know it right now, can't live without fear. It's impossible. Maybe for a yogi or two, but you could imagine it, couldn't you? You could imagine a world. I mean, your imagination's not limited. You could imagine a world that evolved in such a way that, here's the tough one, imagine no possessions. I mean, even John said, I wonder if you can. I mean, even chipmunks have nuts. I mean, this is a tough thing. But can you go there? Can you stretch your mind far enough to imagine what it would be like if everybody I know it's communism. I'm not purporting it's good. If human beings could not be lazy, it might work. But, it never worked. But could you imagine it? Could you imagine stretching your mind so far that everybody in the world, shares everything in the world, and nobody owns anything, and everybody helps I mean, could you imagine that?
I visited Portland, Oregon, in October of this year, and I asked about the program I heard they had where the city owned thousands of bicycles and painted them all some particular bright colors so you knew they were city bicycles. And the idea was you could jump on one of these and ride it anywhere and leave it in the bike rack at the other end of town, and somebody else would use it a day or two later and ride it to wherever they wanted to go. And I thought, oh, what a great idea, sort of neo-socialist, but it's a nice idea. So I asked about it, whatever happened, and they said, oh, all the bikes got stolen.
I would buy stock in a spray paint company, because every single one of those bikes is getting stolen and spray painted a different color.
But to imagine that might work.
Yeah, it's a cool thought. It is a cool thought.
And why not imagine it again and again? Because maybe it's the inability of too many people to imagine something positive like that prevents it from happening. But what is the trend? What is the trend? Are you aware of an evolution, not only of the physical species, not only are human beings changing and evolving physically, because everything does. The flu bug evolves and mutates every year. Evolution is obvious and apparent to anybody who's had just a little bit of science. But besides Darwinism, the basics of natural selection and evolution of the species, there's the evolution of consciousness along the same lines. Those who overspecialized and lose their ability to generalize tend to become extinct. Those who maintain a nice balanced outlook and understanding of life, they grow faster and faster. People who want to understand their thoughts and their feelings and empathize with others rather than judge are growing. They're accelerating their natural evolution. If not of themselves as a physical species, my argument is they're evolving their consciousness. And that's part of imagination without limits, to grow your awareness of your ability to think and feel. Imagine. Not just better thoughts or more positive thoughts or managing your emotions so they're more happy, joy, and not so sad and depressed, but to elevate yourself through imagination, through the contemplative states that Steve was just talking about, reflection, introspection, meditation. There's lots of names for it. But just to, once a day at least, slow your life down for 10 or 20 minutes and take a look at what you're doing. Watch yourself think. Watch yourself react to feelings. Watch yourself watching yourself. It's a slippery little bugger. You won't be able to hold it for very long at first, but with a little practice, letting go is important. Slow breathing, deep physical relaxation is real important. Feeling really safe and relaxed, allowing those brain waves to come down. And boy, that's where the imagination just springs into being. And I think that's when we begin to understand our role as real magicians, as people who can manifest reality and uplift what's already out here but needs some redemption, we can improve this situation. We have kitchens to feed people, we have hospitals to heal people, we have schools to educate people, but we can do a lot better.
Yeah, and the way we do a lot better is we have good ideas and great ideas and incredible ideas. And the way we have those ideas is by exercising our imagination. And we don't get great ideas with our memory. We don't get great ideas with our observation. We get great ideas by taking what's in our memory, adding it to what we observe, and making stuff up. We're all graduates of MSU, make stuff up. So it's exercising that ability to invent things, to create things, to innovate, and to get out of the reality that you see now and create a different one. For me, one of the greatest portals into my imagination is reading one of the greatest portals into my imagination is reading fiction, and especially science fiction. But stepping out of what is and imagining a world that doesn't really exist, a parallel universe, if you will, of fiction, stretches my imagination. And then by thinking about situations, scenarios I'd never thought of before, outside of what the author's actually saying, but what's triggered inside my mind, I get to stretch my imaginations even farther. I mean, most everything that was invented, and I think inventors are certainly great, masters of imagination, most everything that was invented was predicted in science fiction, the internet being the one notable exception. But people dream things up, and then they come to be, and it's like being on that cutting edge of dreaming things up. I guess one of the biggest things I ever did in my life was dream up this way of combining self-hypnosis with speed reading, and I invented this alpha learning thing when I was a kid, and it's just making something up. It's taking one thing and another thing and put it together in a new or different way that nobody's ever done before, using your imagination, not reading from the menu, not looking in the classifieds for the job, but inventing something, making something up, creating something new, something different, and whether you actually do manifest it or not, just thinking about it is the exercise your mind needs.
I'm thinking about musical hooks right now. I'm thinking about times that I've sat down with a guitar and learned a song that was popular that I was hearing on the radio or something. And that what surprised me more often than not was how really simple this little lick was. The signature lick, anyway, the hook. It might have been in the chorus, might have been some little thing the piano player did. For me, more often than not, it was a guitar riff that caught my attention.
And you hear it and you know what song it is. Just that one.
Oh, yeah, it really identifies the whole thing. Yeah. And it's what makes it a hook, It's this, boy, it just reaches out and grabs you and you know that's a hit. Well, they're always really simple. And my tendency, if I were going to write a song or try to write something clever, would be to make it complicated, to make it complex. And I've learned in my life that that's just indicative of being a neophyte, being a newbie, that you want to make it complicated, like the young guitar player that just shreds 1,000,000 miles an hour, and then Clapton walks out and plays that lead riff, and you look wonderful tonight. Very simple, bending the notes just right, putting so much emotion into it. Imagination is often a simple thing. The beauty of imagination is seeing the truth and the wisdom in simplicity, not in real complex and ornate and overly wrought ideas, but just some simple idea that came to you so gently and almost as if floating on perfumed winds, gentle breezes, these ideas coming through us. That to me is a sense of contemplation and imagination without limits, just opening yourself to what often occurs, really simple, basic ideas, but they still hit you in a whole new way. You still get that wonderful, lid-lifting rush of, wow, I'd never even thought of it like that.
So if the challenge was, as a exercise to stretch your imagination, imagine your life 5 years from now the best you could possibly imagine it, in every single way. Now, that's the challenge. Imagine your health being way better than it is now. Imagine your prosperity being over the top. Imagine your relationships being like so deep and so loving and so wonderful. And imagine your career just, Yeah, the odds of that all happening is really small. Not impossible, mind you, but really small. But the exercise of doing it. I mean, as long as you're going to stretch your imagination, why not plant seeds in that direction? Why imagine anything? You can imagine other things too, but why not imagine that in addition? I mean, it's one of the easiest and most wonderful things to get started on, but it's really one of the most challenging things to go really deeply into. How good could it get? I mean, how great can you imagine it? How wonderful a world could you imagine living in 5 years from now?
Let's dream it up. Let's dream up some ideas. And again, we're going to do this in paradise. That's our way of referring to the alpha brainwave level, maybe even a little deeper sometimes, getting into theta brainwaves. But it's that place between awake and asleep. If you go to sleep, you're unconscious. If you're wide awake, you got 8 or 10 ideas competing for your attention, and you're all scattered. What about a place in the middle, a place of balance? Let's go there. Close your eyes now. Get comfortable. And take a nice, slow, deep breath or two, really slowing things down. Do it again, pulling in strength and power as you inhale, and boy, as you exhale, just as slowly now. Oh, feel that relaxation, feel that sense of safety and letting go.
And with every breath you release, even more inner peace. Tension, anxiety, confusion all cease with great ease. And imagine yourself in your paradise place. And if you've done this before, what to do this time when you go to your paradise place, I want you to imagine something new, something different, something wonderful, something that's never been there before, something that adds the beauty of this place, something that makes it more than it's ever been. Use your imagination, give it your spin, and add something new. And as you do, whatever it is that comes to you, see if you can make it even better than your first thought. See if you can make it improve. See if you can add some special touches. See if you can make it move you deep inside. With confidence and pride, add something new. Use your imagination. Be the master of creation in this beautiful place of peace.
Remember a time when you felt really loved, loving and lovable. A time you felt really, really safe. A time you felt really warm, like when you had the covers pulled up all the way around your neck, even though the window was open and it was sort of cold outside. And luxuriate in those feelings of love and peace and feeling safe and warm. And allow yourself to float upon that as if you were floating on a cloud. Supported by these wonderful feelings. And allowing yourself to go wherever the wind blows, this way or that. Imagination without limits. No goal, no destination. Opening yourself to all possibilities. Imagine a blank canvas in front of you. And don't be in too big a hurry to fill that canvas. Let it remain blank for a while. And let the symbols and images come to you. Let them come to you.
Let them come to you. Just let them come to you. Whatever you allow comes through. Just let it come to you. And use your imagination to go places you've never been. It's easy. Just make the time. Close your eyes and then begin to imagine something different, something you've never seen before. Greater, more wonderful, more magnificent. Somehow it's more. Stretch your imagination. Imagine it changing the whole wide world. Imagine ideas just coming out, just like a flag that's being unfurled. Just imagine it, just coming out. Just let it in and it comes through. If you open up and let it in, it comes back and comes out of you. So stretch your imagination in any direction you choose, because your mind, your amazing mind, is such a wonderful tool for you to use. And by giving it the opportunity to stretch beyond what's true into things that are just imaginary, you create a greater you. By allowing your imagination to go beyond what's simply true into things extraordinary, you create a greater you.
We all know the experience of aha. Suddenly remembering or realizing something new, or understanding a large concept that just fell together in your mind. Imagination without limits. In these levels of mind, you can practice the aha experience on demand. Even now, sitting here like this, you're promoting the likelihood of an aha experience. Turn your attention to something that has felt close recently, a revelation or realization that you can feel coming toward you, but it has seemed to remain at some distance from you. But now, turn your attention. It might be a goal or a solution. It might be a circumstance, a situation, or an event. It could be a relationship or a particular development in one or more of your relationships. And this little dream, this little imagination, this little aha that's coming might even be very personal. It might be all about you. The spiritual warrior looks forward, moves directly at the imagination, the dream, even if there's a little anxiety attached. The spiritual warrior feels it and lets it go, or others might feel it and hold on and stop and go no farther. You feel it and move forward as if it's actually a wind at your back, always wanting to know more. you have the ability to explore deeply ideas that you may not believe in and that you may never believe in. You may use your imagination to confirm and reconfirm why you've always felt this way. And then again, there might be a variation, a permutation, a new way of looking at something that enriches you and enhances your life immeasurably. Can you imagine that?
You can. You know it's true. You know you can. The question is, will you? Will you let yourself? Will you allow? Will you break down the block you have somehow and understand there's no danger here? There's no need for anxiety or any fear. It's just an imagination. It isn't true. It's just an imagination, but for a big part of you, it changes who you are and what you do. So imagine it better and better than it's been. That's the start. That's where you begin. Imagine any situation and what's the best outcome you can choose. And that's the bullseye that you now can use. And you might not hit it. You probably won't, but that's not the point. Once you've got something to aim at, not just anywhere in the joint. It's like there. It's like that's what I'm imagining. That's what my mind now knows I want to create. And the more I practice, I can turn it from being good at that to actually really being great. Yeah, I can be really great at creating what I choose with my imagination as the bullseye, the aim that I choose. Yeah, I can get great. And what I need to do is allow my imagination to get better too.
Your dreams are the seedlings of your reality. You're familiar with the part of life that's happened to you. Turn your attention now to the part that flows from you. Plant the seeds. Dream your dreams. Live with a high degree of expectation, with faith, hope, optimism, and an understanding that for those who love, all things work together for good. The universe conspires to support you.
So imagine that the universe itself could speak to you right now and to offer you the words of encouragement you most need to hear, the perfect words for your heart and mind to hear. Let your imagination stretch to the farthest limits and let your perspective go way, way, way back. So you're looking at this big, giant picture, and if the universe, which knows everything, could give you the words of advice, the words of encouragement, the words of understanding, the words of support that you most need to hear. And maybe there'll be a picture, and maybe there'll be sounds and smells and tastes along with it, but the universe, use your imagination, can give you everything you need right now. Imagine, what would that be? What would it sound like? What would it look like? What would it smell like? What would it taste like? How would it feel if the universe could give you everything that you need right now to heal and to grow? Everything you need to feel, everything you need to know.
Now bring that belief, that simple expectation, that feeling with you as you reorient yourself to the sound of our voices. Allow yourself to imagine, to remember what you'll see in a moment when we ask you to open your eyes wide awake and back in the room. And take a nice, slow, deep breath. Feel in your body the inhalation. Hold as you peak. And as you exhale naturally now, open your eyes wide awake, alert, rested, refreshed, feeling fine, better than before.
You know, I was just reflecting on a couple of areas of my life where I really exercise my imagination a lot. And one of them is spending some time each day imagining what it would be like to be my wife, to put myself into her mind, into her shoes, and like if I do this, how is she going to do that, and how can I make her happier, and what is her wants and needs, and I'm really, the more I get to know her, the better I can do at that, and it's a lot of fun, and she does it too. Like, imagine you're somebody else, especially somebody you know and love well, and like, how can you make their life even better? That's one area I've enjoyed. And the other thing that I've been really enjoying doing, and I've done this a lot lately, is listening to our shows with beginner's mind. Like pretending I'm not me, I'm somebody else. I've never heard any of this stuff before, and I'm just listening to this Snyder guy and this Benner guy, and like how would it be if I was just a guy that I'd never heard this before? It's a lot of fun to imagine how the public would listen and respond to this. I don't know if I'm any good at it or not. I can't get in anybody else's mind, but the exercise of imagining beginner's mind in this scenario or in any scenario is really a good exercise.
Well, I want to thank you for the visual of you in your wife's shoes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I walk a mile in her shoes. Doesn't mean I end up a mile away wearing the wrong shoes.
No, I think it'd be a tight fit.
Indeed.
It's
Tippy toes.
Entertaining visual. Thank you for that. Beginner's mind. We should do another show on that. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
That is part of mindfulness, and that always reminds me, February 13th is not that far away in the year 2011, and we'd love to have you join us in Nahiku on the northeastern shores of Maui, just west of Hana, Maui, for our mindfulness retreat. This is a 5-day intensive. You can find out about it on the web. Just go to focusedpassion.com and click on the button for the Maui retreat.
I think it's upper right, I think.
Can't miss it. And you can also download a program that we recorded a couple of weeks ago that'll tell you all about it.
A couple of dear friends of mine, Vistage Chair and his wife, just signed up. It makes me very excited about it. We've got a chef lined up that's going to be wonderful. We've got this beautiful... The whales came yesterday for the first time. They'll be here all the way through February into March and maybe even to early April, but they'll be peaking in February. It'll be wonderful. And we'll see rainbows and we'll see waterfalls and we'll see paradise. And, the whole point of this thing is not to experience paradise so much as to... After you experience really days of paradise, to let it really soak in and really, really experience it, then to anchor it, to like lock that feeling into your being so that you can have it on demand anytime you want. As I think I said last week, imagine paradise in a traffic jam. It's like anytime you're really stressed out, you can just take a deep breath and get a really deep experience of paradise, because you had a really deep experience of paradise by coming and sharing with us in February, Valentine's Day week, the Maui Mindfulness Retreat.
It's interesting the way mindfulness has become so popular just for stress reduction in this country. Now, the benefits go far beyond that to awakening consciousness, developing your awareness of yourself. It improves relationships. It solves problems.
Healing, learning, so many areas.
It's like a panacea because, again, you get this elevated perspective. And most of what you think are problems in your life cease to exist once you get a more clear perspective on how much of it you're really creating and contributing to unnecessarily. It's quite remarkable. It's beyond intelligence. It's consciousness. And to be mindfully aware, we'll train you on how to do it, but as Steve said, it'll be a skill set that you take home, a portable tool. And you might even want to share this with other people too, even though they might not have the advantage of 5 days of dedicated work and play. I hate to call these workshops and talk about workbooks. They're really a lot of play going on here. Imagine we're going to introduce you to ways of looking at paradise, at those whales and the waterfalls and the rainbows, at the flowers and the fruits, in a level of attention that is going to be new. And how to access that again, on demand, again and again. Bring yourself back into the moment and release what most of us think of as our lives, the stories we tell ourselves and each other again and again And if you're getting tired of those stories and you'd like to wake up to the reality of the unfolding moment, you got to be here. You got to be here. FocusedPassion.com. Click the button on the retreat. Find out all about it.
Yeah, it's an amazing part of the world. It's it's the North Shore of Maui, the very east end, just west of Hanatown, right on the ocean, 120-foot cliff, 70 acres, private, nobody else around. It's just the most incredible piece of paradise. I've traveled all over the world. I looked for the place I most wanted to live in the whole wide world, and this was the place that I came up with. And my wife, thank goodness, agreed totally with me. She wanted to live here too. So we've carved out an amazing little piece of paradise, and we've never shared it with a group of people before, but we're looking forward to sharing it with you now. So come join us. There's only going to be room for a handful more people, but we still do have some open spots. So it's really the cheapest way to come to Maui. $2,500 for 5 days. A hotel room and food would cost more than that. So it's really, plus you get the seminar, plus you get the paradise. It's really an amazing experience. If you've never seen Maui, you'll never find a more easy, wonderful way to see it. Come to our Maui Mindfulness Retreat.
And you can register at the website, or you can send us an email, info@focusedpassion.com, or leave us a voicemail message anytime, 24/7, at our Focused Passion contributor support line. That's 818-973-3154. It's an LA number. Again, voicemail. Use it anytime, 24/7. 818-973-3154. Leave your full name, telephone number with area code, and we'll call you back, okay? Thanks for your interest. Thanks for being here. Talk to you next week. As always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.